Welcome to Don't Be Caged by Your Age. I'm so happy you're here to share how you're shattering age-related expectations and stereotypes. How you doing?
I have been looking forward to this conversation like you can't even believe. So here for this.
Well, Diann and I met on a wonderful platform hosted by our dear friend, Vinny Potestivo. And gosh, you never know where you're going to find connections in life, where you're going to find like-minded people. And so, Diann, I'm so thrilled you're here. Please let folks know where you live. And because we're all about aging out loud and proud here on the podcast, how many years the world has been enjoying the gift of your presence.
I'm 69 years old, and while I am a native of Los Angeles, California, for the last 3 years, we have been dividing our time between the California desert and the Oregon coast. So I'm currently located on the coast, and the water is just inches away, and I love it.
Oh my gosh. So you go from verdant green, tons of water to that wonderful dry desert, great
Mhm.
sunsets experience. I love that for you, Diann. Yay. Diann, you transitioned from psychotherapist to coach and entrepreneur in your midlife at a time when many are told, don't you want to be slowing down, doll? I mean, come on. So, what inner shift or outer spark gave you the green light to rewrite the rules of your life and career at that stage? And how has age been an asset in your reinvention journey?
Well, I'm going to give you the lead up to that because I had been a professor of social work, a administrator, supervisor, mentor. I was leading the next generation of clinical social workers into the field. And after doing that for quite a number of years, I stumbled across evidence of fraud by the agency for whom I was then clinical director. That began what I now call the year of harassment. And what I discovered after my husband finally persuaded me to speak to an attorney was that while I was most definitely being harassed, it was not considered unlawful harassment because I was not a member of a protected category. So at that point, I decided I would open a private practice because I didn't want to take my chances on being hired by someone else who was incompetent and unethical. So I did a private practice for about 5 to 7 years. And during that time, I was focusing exclusively on women and midlife transitions. Two things happened. One, well, I was very successful in private practice. Kind of wish I'd done it sooner, but I discovered so many of the women that were coming in for help with midlife transitions actually had undiagnosed ADHD. And what was really interesting to me is that it turns out I was one of them. Now, fast forward through quite a few of these women, and what I realized was that not only did I need to figure this out for myself, which I did and got officially diagnosed, but I realized that the conversations that I was interested in having were still about helping people. And most of those people are women, but that I really wanted to evolve those conversations from talking about problems to talking about possibilities. And when I realized that, Andy, I realized you've outgrown the role of therapist, and the role you've grown into is that of coach. So I got my coach training, I closed up shop, and I carried on, and I've been a coach exclusively since 2017.
I love that. And also, you evolved into entrepreneur even deeper
Yes.
because you love solving problems. And that's the number one ingredient in a
Mhm.
successful founder and a successful entrepreneur, solving a problem that people are willing to pay for. I love that. And how did you know when these women came in to test them for ADHD at the time? I'm curious about that. And is that why you ended up testing yourself, or was that just part of your practice at that time to have your patients take different tests?
No, actually, it was a little bit more subtle and organic. One of my, and I don't really like to use the word superpower with respect to ADHD, but one of my ADHD strengths is pattern recognition. And that's a really handy thing to have as both a therapist and a coach. And so I just started noticing these patterns. A lot of women at midlife, as you know, have difficulties with anxiety, with depression, difficulties making decisions, feeling stuck, being caught up in perfectionistic patterns, people pleasing, where they want to change their life, but they're worried about what other people will think. And some of the patterns that I just noticed again and again and again, I thought, gosh, this really sounds a lot like ADHD. And I would always ask, because most of the time I was not the first therapist they'd ever seen. I said, have you ever considered that you might have ADHD? Has there anyone else ever told you you might have ADHD? And most of them said no. And quite honestly, before my own ADHD diagnosis, I had previously been diagnosed with anxiety and depression. It's very, very common. And I now think that while some people have both, for many women, it is the undiagnosed, untreated, unaddressed ADHD that actually causes them to be anxious and depressed. So I just whipped out, I remember this very distinctly with one particular client. I just whipped out the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. It's kind of the Bible for therapists and psychiatrists to figure out what someone's diagnosis is. And I've never been one of those people that believes that there should be a power hierarchy when you're working with people where I'm the expert. I know what you have, but I'll tell you if you're lucky. It's like, no, this is your diagnosis. It's going to be in your permanent health record forever, even if I'm wrong. So let's figure this out together. So I opened the manual. I went to the section and I said, okay, put a finger up if you identify with this trait behavior most of the time in most settings. And when it got to the point where they've run out of fingers on both hands, I'm like, you know what? This is what I think is going on. And then I'd hand the manual to them and I'd say, what do you think? And they'd say, wow. And then they would say something like this, well, that kind of makes sense because 2 of my 4 kids have ADHD. It's still, after so many years of diagnosing little boys with ADHD, it still really chaps my hide.
Yeah.
How many therapists, psychiatrists, and even patients don't actually know this is a genetic, lifelong condition.
And it's not gender-based.
No,
So you said all the little boys. What about the girls? And
no.
so one thing I'm curious about is that what I noticed in myself when estrogen left my body, which was when I was
Mm-hmm.
48, I
Yep.
flatlined and I had increased anxiety. I had my first anxiety attack. I had all sorts of things. And I started thinking, well, maybe is it because I lack estrogen? And unfortunately, listener, I can't take estrogen in any other form because I
Mm.
have morning sickness. I mean, I had morning sickness for the first day or 2 on birth control pills. That's how sensitive I am. But I knew that things had changed and shifted because I no longer had that sort of gel or some kind of lubricant, no pun intended, of course, to help me manage how I thought or processed information or navigated the world. Did you see something like that, especially since you were working with women in midlife?
It's absolutely true. And as a matter of fact, the fastest growing group of people being diagnosed with ADHD are women over 40. And there's 2 reasons for this. One, it's like I just referred to, when they have a child or children that are diagnosed, an astute clinician will say, so, mom, dad, which side of the family do we think this came from? And then they're usually pointing fingers at each other. Not me. So that's one way. If you're in your 40s or 50s, you've got kids who are at the age where if they hadn't been caught already, they might be catching it now because they're struggling more. And the other reason is exactly as you said, what I call the estrogen evacuation. When estrogen has left the building or is on its way out, there is definitely an increase in the symptoms that are associated with ADHD. So much so that one of my good friends went to a physician to rule out early onset Alzheimer's because she thought, I'm literally losing my marbles and I don't even know where the marble bag is. And it turns out she has ADHD and she's been able to cope and work around it for years until she started perimenopause and menopause. So that's probably the number one reason why women, especially women who don't have kids and wouldn't have found out any other way. And sadly, a lot of gynecologists don't know about the estrogen dopamine connection. So they may just try to treat the hormones without making that referral to a psychiatrist for an ADHD.
Wow. Talk a little bit more about that because I just thought I needed estrogen back in my body. And that clearly sounds like, no, that's not what's going to fix this.
It depends. And the reason why it depends is that ADHD is a spectrum condition like so many others, mild, moderate, severe. Every person with ADHD has enough of the traits on the list to quote unquote qualify for the diagnosis. But what really makes the difference and why I think so many people decide, I'm not going to bother getting an official diagnosis. I mean, what difference does it make at 50 or whatever? I started taking medication for the first time in my early 60s, and I found that it has been extremely beneficial, even though I have been a high functioning person with ADHD all of my life. But here's the number one thing to keep in mind. What makes the diagnosis of ADHD is not just that you have these symptoms, or as I prefer to say, traits. It's that you have these traits and you are impaired in your functioning by these traits. So one of the reason why, and here's the entrepreneur connection, why so many of us become entrepreneurs is because the very traits that qualify us for an ADHD diagnosis make it very difficult for us to perform at our best in corporate or highly structured settings. So when we go out on our own and we can create the conditions that allow us to thrive, there's not so much impairment. So if you've been an entrepreneur for many, many years and you're doing the things that you love doing and you have help for the things that you don't love doing, you might not even meet diagnostic criteria, even if you have all the traits, because you're not impaired by them.
Right. Oh
Make
my
sense?
gosh. Yeah, total sense. Listener, we're listening to Diann Wingert, and that's Diann Wingert. She's a business coach for entrepreneurs with ADHD. Please visit DiannWingertCoaching.com. Links will be in the show notes, whether you're on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast platform. Diann, I don't know, and listen, I don't know if you're feeling the same way. I want that manual. I want to start thinking about this. I have three. I mean, there's the four of us in the Lyons Den. My husband and our two sons are all neurodivergent,
Well, see?
ADHD. And I had a younger sister who was, and I know my mother was, never diagnosed. But of course, I love the idea. Is there some magic pill I can take, to help out with something like that? And sometimes that's not the route. I know with our oldest who has what's called NVLD, there are no drugs for it. And so the doctor said, look, he's going to be fine as an adult. He's going to find the places where he can thrive and be hugely successful because he's going to bring so much talent and so many wonderful facets to what he does. But good luck getting him through public school.
And guess what? And that's another thing. You brought up the gender difference, and there's definitely a gender bias for many, 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 many decades. And it's not in favor of women. It's one of the reasons why I'm now part of a coalition called FindTheADHDGirls.org, because we need to identify girls as early as we do boys so that they can go through their lives making decisions that are in alignment with who they are and how
Right.
they are, not how they think they're supposed to be, because it looks different in girls than it does in boys.
Absolutely.
But
And
medication may not be the only way to go, and as a matter of fact, I refer to this as the magic pill, because so many of us think, "Oh, well, now I have my diagnosis. Now I can just get medication and everything will be fixed." First of all, you don't need to be fixed. And secondly, medication does one thing, and it does it rather well. It reduces your distractibility so that you can stay focused and on task longer. But if you don't know what to point your brain at, you may just be persisting a whole lot longer on Netflix or your or Instagram Reels. So most of us require other things in addition to medication.
well, and that's also fascinating. But our youngest, he has ADHD, and I chose not to have any medication. Because in elementary school, they're like, dose them, dose them, dose them. And I said, no, no, no. And we did some neuro-linguistic programming with him, which really helped his brain retrieve information. And then in middle school, I let him make the decision.
Mm.
And like eighth grade, I said, okay, and let's try a few. Sometimes you have to try a few to get to what the insurance company will pay for. But he tried different ones, and he processed and said, this makes me too nervous. This makes me too anxious. And he was able to advocate and manage when he takes his ADHD meds. So throughout high school, maybe if he knew some tests were coming up and he needed to hyper focus, otherwise he did not like the side effects for him. And I loved that. And I think as adults, we need to do the same thing. We need to say, is this a good fit for me? Do I need it for special occasions?
Mm.
And part of being on the spectrum of that is, yeah, our oldest hyper focus. He's just like his dad. I mean, all the world could be falling apart outside, and when my husband or our oldest are focused,
Yeah,
they don't see it.
there they go.
And whereas the youngest is looking out the window and daydreaming and coming up with his next game design. But so it's all different. And I know as women, as we age, there's so many other things that we're getting slammed with. The side effects from perimenopause to aging and things drying up, all of this. It's just like, gosh, darn it, you can hit me with one more diagnosis here. But from my own personal experience, Diann, I know that when I understand something, when I have an awareness of why,
Yeah.
that's almost like a recovery for me. It improves my whole circumstance. Talk a little bit around how you help women who are understanding that they're ADHD-ish and how they can navigate life, entrepreneurship, all the things now that they're over 50 or 60 and trying to
Yeah.
thrive.
Well, I think there are a lot of different roads to entrepreneurship, as you know. Some of us are in glamour industries, and we, quite frankly, age out. They don't want us around anymore because we're no longer nubile. So, and cheap and easily manipulated. That kind of goes with the
Yeah.
territory. So we get pushed out. And some women cannot get reemployed in their chosen field. So they start their own business, frankly, because they have to and they're not ready to just hang it up. Other women get laid off. Some have an aging parent that needs care. Some have a disabled child that needs care. So there's all kinds of different routes by which women start their own businesses at midlife and beyond. But if you have ADHD, most of us find that being forced to sit through meetings, being forced to listen to like people just talking for the sake of talking, not making any decisions, not taking any actions. And you're going to be right back in the same room in 7 days, listening to the same nonsense by the same people and making no progress. I mean, a lot of people with ADHD, if they're the more impulsive sort, they'll just act out. Like I remember being called flippant because I would just say things that it's like, are we still talking about this? And that's not really a good look if you're in leadership. So it can be a career stabilizing move, the impatience. And also
Yeah.
we have a need for speed. We have a need to take action. We have a need to move things forward and not just sort of talk about it. So while you would think those traits would be very desirable in the workplace. And in some cases, they are. Most of the time, you're told that you're focusing on things that are not in your job description. That's not the way we do things here. And so people get impatient and they just want to do things their way. And I think here's kind of a universal trait, and it tends to lead us to entrepreneurship either because we keep getting fired or we keep quitting, or one of the other paths I mentioned, is that even if we don't know what we're doing, we would prefer to figure it out ourselves and struggle through it rather than be told what to do and how to do it.
Yeah.
And when you're an employee at any level, you're kind of expected to be a team player and to follow the rules. And that just doesn't set well with someone who's wired differently, who would rather struggle their way to a solution than be told, do this way. So I think entrepreneurship suits us well. Now, that being said, one of the biggest problems I see with women with ADHD, especially if they're new to that knowledge, here's like the combination of they're newly diagnosed and they're new to entrepreneurship. We have been conditioned for decades to see ourselves in a certain way, to see ourselves because we've lived in a world that's made by and for neurotypicals. So most of us come to this stage of life, this stage of adulthood and entrepreneurship with all these thoughts about how we're not enough, or maybe we're too much, or we're not doing things the right way. And so it takes a lot of confidence. It takes a lot of courage, and it takes the willingness to fail to become a successful entrepreneur. And when you're a woman who's been conditioned for decades not to make mistakes, because making a mistake means you screwed up, you're wrong, you're bad, you don't know what you're doing, it severely inhibits you, especially in those early stages of entrepreneurship, because you need to take action, you need to take risk, you need to experiment, you need to try things. And that means you're going to make mistakes, you're going to fail. And if you see that as a life-threatening event, you're not going to get very far.
Oh
So
my gosh.
we have to
Yeah,
unlearn that.
absolutely. You have to reframe everything as, oh my gosh, look what I just learned about what doesn't work or what does work, and I'm going to apply it this way. You cannot look at it as like, oh my God, I made a mistake. Oh, yay, we made a mistake, and here's what had happened, and this is what we learned. So I love that. And of course, I've been unemployable listener since 1992, and I'm sure it's because I've been a card carrying member of the PBS club for forever, and that's the Pushy Broad Squad Club. I like to get to the solution. I do not want to talk about the problem. And I'm really thinking about getting myself tested for ADHD because pattern awareness is definitely a strength of mine. I'm not going to use superpower now that Diann has educated me and raised my consciousness around that. Diann, you brought up the messages that women get growing up that can really prohibit them from embracing entrepreneurship as the life giving experience it can be, provided you're not viewing it through the lens that we were raised with in the indoctrination, and understanding that no, you don't need to be perfect at this. Ship it if it's 70% good. Don't wait forever. All the procrastinations. You have the 3 Ps, which I think are wonderful: the perfectionism, procrastination, and people pleasing that can
Mm-hmm.
sabotage women. But how do you help in your practice? How do you help them evolve? And what's your go-to strategy for unhooking from these indoctrinated patterns and these 3 Ps? And I'd also love to have you share some micro habits or mindset shifts that has made a big difference with your clients and your listeners of the ADHD-ish podcast.
Well, that's very ADHD-ish of you to ask me a question that's actually 5 questions all smashed into one. But I'll do my best. I will do my very best to sort them out. Okay. So you mentioned my unholy trinity of procrastination, perfectionism, and people pleasing. We should also make it a unholy quad because there's at least one more P in there. But I'll tell you what. All of those things, the procrastination, the perfectionism, and the people pleasing, I like to think of them as learned habits because we've been outsourcing our self-esteem to others. We are in a culture that teaches us to look to others for permission, to look to others for approval. And when you really think about it, you get to like 50 years old, you're like, what the heck? I've literally been asking other people, including total strangers, by the way, if it's okay for me to be who I already am. What the, so I think I think that's why 50 is like such a turnkey point in life because, usually your kids are grown and flown if you have them. Usually your marriage is either kind of, running itself, or it might be on its way out, but your estrogen situation may reveal ADHD. And it's like, you know what? It's time for me to start being true to myself. So I teach my clients how to unlearn the habits of procrastination, perfectionism, and people pleasing in 3 ways. One, by helping them understand what their actual values are, what their actual values are. It may not be that carved wood thing that you have on the wall that says fun, faith, and family. Those may not, they may be your core values, but they may not be. Your core values may be freedom, flexibility, and adventure. So helping women understand that the best path for them in life, and certainly the best business model, is going to be in alignment with at least 3 of their top 5 core values. So we do that. 2, I think we have 2 kinds of problems when it comes to decision making. And when you're an entrepreneur, you are making hundreds of decisions every week, large and small. Women like me, women with ADHD, tend to go in 2 directions that are problematic. One is impulsive thinking, impulsive decision making. We don't want to figure it out, so we just pin the tail on the donkey.
Just make the damn decision, right? Just boom.
Just pick something, right? And that can oftentimes lead to regrettable and sometimes very costly mistakes. The other end of that spectrum is overthinking, second guessing, ruminating, and literally missing the opportunity to act at all because you were diddling around trying to figure out what to do for so long. The opportunity is up and gone. So I get them to set limits. How many resources you're going to check, because research can become a rabbit hole. How much time are we going to invest in making this particular decision? And it's not going to be enough for the overthinkers, and it's going to be far too much for the impulsive ones. But and I don't say this is what you have to do. It's like, I'm going to invite you to consider a more streamlined way of making decisions that actually leads to more confidence and better outcomes overall. We're going to shorten the amount of time you guys spend on making decisions, and we're going to lengthen it for you guys. So core values, better decision making, and also the third thing, and I just did a series on my podcast about this, starting, stopping, and shifting gears. If you just think about those 3 things, getting started. We procrastinate, we're perfectionistic, we're researching a million different options. If you can get starting faster, stronger, better, and then stopping problems, that's when we're hyper focused, when we've got diminishing returns for how much time we're spending on something, or we're going back and revisiting a decision we've already made. And then shifting gears, distractions, interruptions, moving between different types of work, between different clients. We need 3 sets of skills, which I teach: starting skills, stopping skills, and shifting skills. That covers so much territory, and it really increases their confidence in how much action they're going to be able to take to move the needle forward. The business happens in action taking, not in thinking and planning and fluffing the pillows in your head.
Right. Oh my gosh, so much valuable information there. First of all, listener, if you haven't done a true core value exercise, do it. And you can, of course, visit Diann and find out how you could work with her. DiannWingertCoaching.com. That's DIANN, WingertCoaching.com. But also, what I love that you said is sometimes, too, women can get caught up in a flurry of activities. They're used to just push, 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 push. They've maybe adapted some of their masculine energy, thinking they've got to go and hunt, 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 hunt. When a lot of times they need to step back, as you said, to stop, rethink, think about it. And they're doing their activities based on what they've learned in the 80s or 90s or 00s. And that was different hustle behavior that we don't want to be doing at this time of our life. We want to be managing our energy portfolio and doing and bringing what we want to do, while without stressing ourselves into that super multitask Wonder Woman stuff, because it a lot of times isn't that flurry of activity that and especially the ADHD brain might have you doing all the shiny things at once. Your podcast, and this is what I love about all of your work, and you're always looking at the landscape that women are trying to navigate and helping them to bust the myth that they should be settling down now. Even if their partner's ready to go play golf, no, it does not mean that you are ready to go and just chill out because they are. And forget this staying small business as well. But at the same time, Diann, entrepreneurship may not be for everyone. They might fit in as an intrapreneur. So how do women like that try to navigate? And for some, they just need the steady paycheck, right? They need to be on payroll for peace of mind. And that can be hard. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, I think it's very difficult for a woman in her 50s or 60s to change the corporate culture that she's in.
Yeah.
And and oftentimes if you are an entrepreneur, and I started as an entrepreneur, and I found that there were many places where my ideas, my drive, my energy, my impatience for having the same conversation over and over with no change happening. I was not well regarded there. I was a hard worker, but I was not what they wanted. They wanted me to stay inside the box and color inside the lines. And that is just not where my strengths are to be found. So I think it's if you are in a situation in your 50s or 60s and you're really feeling constrained and confined, you're feeling like your wings are clipped, you're literally being caged by your job, it's going to be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to change the corporate culture. Now, it may not make sense for you to go do something new or take early retirement, but you can certainly consider either finding other people in the organization that you could do like projects with. So you may not be able to change your job description or advocate for more opportunity to forward your creative ideas officially, but you may be able to connect with other people in your organization where you could do projects. Like, I'd like to work together with other people because most of us work really well in collaborative settings where you have the opportunity to contribute those entrepreneurial ideas and that entrepreneurial energy without ruffling too many feathers or making your boss feel threatened. And that's one way to do it. And another way to do it is to consider a side hustle that allows you to, and maybe you don't even do it for money. Maybe you do it for your soul.
Right.
Maybe you do it because you have this creativity, this originality, this drive, this energy, this need to contribute. You do it as a passion project. There's a lot of women in our age group who use their podcast for that. They're not using it to support a business or help them find customers for a business. They're using it as an opportunity to express their thoughts and to contribute their ideas and to literally have their voice heard. And that may be a wonderful way to siphon off that entrepreneurial energy if there is no room for it in your job.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's outstanding advice. I tell that to all the podcasters in my New England podcast community. It is about feeding a passion that we have and a purpose that we have. Now, that
Mhm.
said, podcasts are often a gateway to opportunity, but
Also true.
it's an outlet and a sense of accomplishment, and especially when you really need, because there can be so much uncertainty in life, you want to have that beginning, middle, and an end experience. Like, here's
Mm,
the idea, we baked it, and then it's out into the world, and I feel great. Boom, episode done.
mhm.
And of course, it's a wonderful way to stay connected as we age. So, do you ever run into challenges with this age group not being comfortable hiring a coach, not being willing to invest in themselves?
Hmm. I hadn't really thought about it quite that way. I do find that a lot of my clients are younger. A lot of my clients are like 35 to 45, but I have a nice group of women who are actually starting their first businesses post retirement age or near. I refer to them as my encore entrepreneurs. They've already had a career, they've already had a life, they've already done the thing, but there's something they've always wanted to do. And I think that's absolutely delightful. And I mean, I'm not one for day drinking and pickleball as I age. So I'm probably always going to be working. And I think for those of us who want to do that later in life, absolutely. Do I think that some people have a hard time investing in themselves? I think from the time a woman has children, she tends to find it easier to invest in them than in her. And I think that's
100%.
that's also part of our cultural conditioning that, mom eats last kind of thing. Like mom's always first, she takes care of her kids, then she takes care of her husband, then she takes care of her extended family and her church group and all that. And if there's anything left, that's for you, sister.
But Diann, I brought this up because, and my apologies for interrupting, I brought this up because I just keep hearing it. So many women trying to, get on YouTube or, find out how to do this, or they're just going to wing it. No, you can't wing this. This is something you need help with because you're not seeing what's holding you back. You cannot see what's holding you back. And so, Diann, that's why I asked this question is first of
Mm.
all, carve out the funds, throw it on a credit card. I don't care. You are worth it. And in order to move forward, you need someone like Diann who is going to hold up the mirror and help you see how you are preventing yourself from moving forward in a new direction, what behaviors you don't even know you have that are not working. I mean, if you wanted to do a speech, you might hire a speech coach so they can say, what's with the hand movements or the eyes, or what are you doing with scratching your nose? Things like
Mm.
that. It's the same thing. If you're trying to find a new pathway in life, why wing it? You cannot build alone. You absolutely need that high level coach who's going to help you as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, because you've been an employee most of your life and you need the mindset shift. So, Diann, that's why I brought that.
I'm glad that you did, and I think that it may be a little hard for someone in their 50s or 60s with ADHD to hear, because for most of us, figuring things out on our own is actually very rewarding, very stimulating, and it's probably a pretty big part of our identity. But here's what I have to say to that. Like, I've probably wasted more good ideas than most humans could ever hope to have with that stubborn, self-reliant mindset. And now I would say I'm well aware that the road ahead is much shorter than the road behind. And when I work with someone, my goal is to shave decades off their learning curve so they can get further faster. That's exciting for me because I want to see more people win and not become exhausted and burned out in the process.
Oh my gosh. I just love this conversation. Diann, you really are the gift that keeps on giving. And I want more and more people to find you, learn from you, hire you. Please let everybody know how they can work with you, follow you, stay in touch with you, and listen to you.
Well, thank you for that, Ande. And you've done such a great job of repeating my website several times. But I like to say if you like the sound of my voice and what I have to say with it, you owe it to yourself to start following or subscribing to ADHD-ish podcast. And the reason why it's ish is because, as far as I'm concerned, you don't need an official diagnosis to know this is who you are and how you are. So I suggest you check out the podcast. There's a bunch of resources on my website. You can follow my LinkedIn newsletter, which is also called ADHD-ish. And if you visit the website, you can find out all the ways that you can work with me.
Oh my gosh. And I am going to be going to get myself tested because everything that Diann has brought up, I tell you, and now that I have AI, I'm like, I'm chat. I'm getting all sorts of problems solved that way. But I know as a 4 times founder, I know as a former global startup founder, mentor, you cannot navigate this alone. You are going to waste years, money, and time if you don't hire someone to help you. And shifting from the employee mindset to the owner mindset takes some coaching. Right, Diann?
Absolutely true. A lot more than we think. We think we're just going to shift, but it's that learning to dance with failure instead of trying to avoid it. That's just one of the mindset shifts. There's a lot more where that
Oh,
came.
yeah. I just keep honing in on that listener because I've seen too many people give up when they did not need to give up because it's a rocky road. And as long as you know that you're going to get there and figure it out, but you do need some coaching, you need some help. So, yay, Diann. I am so thrilled that you joined us today. And listener, as I'm always telling you, Please remember, you have so much more to give. Don't let those internalized ageist beliefs prevent you from pursuing new dreams and opportunities. The world needs you. It wants you because you bring you uniquely and deliciously in your own way. And there are people out there that want that from you. And
Yes, ma'am.
Delicious Diann, you do it so beautifully. I'm so honored to know you and to see you thriving at 69. Yes, we're both 1956 classic models right here. I'm thrilled that you joined me. Thank you. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure.
Cheers, everyone. Listeners, I'm so grateful you carved out time to tune in and grab the gems from this delicious conversation. Be sure to hop on over to Don't Be Caged by Your Age on LinkedIn or Instagram to share your thoughts about ageism and unretirement. Because in this space, your age doesn't define you, it refines you. If you are inspired by a story you hear, it would mean the world to me if you would subscribe, share, rate, and review the podcast. To receive an alert whenever a new show is posted, please join the Don't Be Caged by Your Age newsletter. Every month, you'll receive links to the podcast and helpful resources for creating possibilities for your unretirement days. Thank you for tuning in. I am so excited to hear how you found ways to thrive after 65. Waving from Boston, cheers.